There may be more worthy NBA MVP candidates this season than I can ever remember. But to me, it comes down to James, either LeBron or Harden. I'm Robin Lundberg here with Ben Pickman and Wilton Jackson. And guys, LeBron James has been the defensive anchor for the best defense in the NBA, kept the Lakers near the top of the West without Anthony Davis. And he's generally my default MVP. He's never been on a team that wasn't outscored when he was off the floor. But James Harden, since he's got to Brooklyn, they've won 14 of their last 15 games, all but one without Kevin Durant, a couple without Kyrie Irving. And his former team, the Houston Rockets, have lost 18 straight games. So to me, James Harden is the biggest threat for LeBron James when it comes to MVP, Ben.
But you threw in the caveat since he got to Brooklyn, and so we can't excuse the pre-Brooklyn era of James Harden this season, right? He played 8 games with the Houston Rockets. He did miss some, and he frankly dogged it, especially towards the end of his tenure, right? His 24.8 points, that was a career low that he had in Houston. His three-point percentage, James Harden's, was tied for the worst he had as a member of the Rockets, and yes, it's certainly clear how valuable he was to the franchise. And you cited it, right? Look at where Houston is compared to where the Nets are. And a lot of that is because you took James Harden off of the Houston Rockets and put him on the Brooklyn Nets. But you can't forget, those 8 games, that's more than a tenth of this NBA season, right? So we can't just throw those games out. And yes, Joel Embiid is missing some time. Yes, Nikola Jokic, the Denver Nuggets might not have the record that, say, the Sixers or the Nets have or that the Lakers have. But those are also still viable candidates who I think also deserve mention and could very easily win this MVP award, include as well as LeBron James. And so I just don't think you can say James Harden is going to win or should be 1-2 with LeBron James without remembering his time in Houston, because that is still very much a part of this season. And when Kevin Durant returns, I think that will take away from James Harden's MVP case as well.
Look, those are fair points. And there are other guys that deserve mention. And we just talked about Damian. Look, I could keep going, right? And the being there the whole season with one team for other guys, not necessarily the way he left Houston, but that is part of the argument. I do think by the end of the season, the Durant thing factors in. But Wilton, to me, what's mind-blowing is that James Harden joined a team that already had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and yet he somehow became the most important player. I mean, that's kind of mind-boggling.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Robin. And you saying that, obviously Kevin Durant has missed games and then Kyrie has also missed games. And so it's kind of hard not to witness and really appreciate what James Harden is doing for the Nets right now. You're talking about, yes, he's stuffing the stat box, but he's also led the Nets in 2 comeback wins, one against a really good Suns team, and then also against the Pacers. And then when you look at it, in the last 15 games, he's averaged a triple-double of 27 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists. And as you mentioned, he still has those 2 players to anchor him. And as being mentioned, Kevin Durant hasn't even come back yet. And I want to mention 2 stats to you. Since 1985, only 2 MVPs have come from a team that has finished worse than second in its conference during the regular season. And the MVP award has only been won by the NBA's leading scorer 4 times in the past 5 years. So when we start looking at and really, considering who's going to win the MVP, we have to consider all these things.
Yeah, I think the fact that the Nets never lose factors into the conversation. But we'll have to see how it shakes out by the end of the season, because I do think it is going to be a tough, long race. And as Ben mentioned, certain factors may dictate how it takes shape, including when particular teammates get back. But right now, my vote would go to James.